John Kenneth Galbraith once said, "Only a fool tries to predict the future." So if that's so, there's an abundance of well-paid jokers in prestigious think tanks and on cable TV talk shows around these days. However, a much larger and less well-paid group of hopelessly afflicted prognosticators can be found in the ranks of fiction writers. Science fiction and techno-thrillers in particular can't resist future gazing. It's in our DNA to dream up an engaging story by starting with a simple question, what if? History suggests that writers have a better track record of foreseeing world events and technological advancements than think tankers and TV talking heads do, or maybe not. One school of thought says fiction writers don't really predict the future, but to the points made here already today, their stories merely prompt policymakers or scientists and engineers to think differently about a problem, and events unfold along the same lines sketched by authors. Now, having worked as both an engineer and an aerospace journalist, I can testify that writing techno-thriller novels is more fun than solving real-world technical problems and reporting hard news. Authors can dream up wild stories and high-tech weapons, yet never worry about those annoying constraints like facts and physics. We rarely have to be concerned how a futuristic system would actually be designed, built, and employed. Now, that said, though, authors are surprised when future-gazing scenarios and systems they wrote about years earlier actually come to pass. So rather than predicting the future, I think we merely look at a geopolitical situation or technology and extrapolate forward several years. So I'd like to share some of the futuristic space-related capabilities that started as what-ifs and ultimately were incorporated into SpaceWars, CounterSpace, and the Permit, the books Rachel just mentioned. So please consider the potential impacts if America's smart scientists and engineers actually developed and fielded the following. A laser beam weapon that disables an adversary's satellite by creating mini electromagnetic pulses in electronic systems on board. It's feasible, and sources claim it's been done in the Navy's China Lake labs by initially firing a laser to create a momentary waveguide or filament through the atmosphere, then firing a maser's microwave pulse down that channel. Hypervelocity weapons delivered from a piloted spaceplane in low Earth orbit. Basically a titanium bar boosted by a rocket. These rods from God can take out an underground nuclear facility without an explosive. A dense material propelled at hypersonic speed delivers a tremendous amount of kinetic energy in a brief time span. Basically, a rod from God has the impact of a tactical nuclear weapon, but leaves nothing behind that can be traced to the U.S. Coyote mentioned space-based angels and demons. Now, angels are small, stealthy spacecraft that are deployed in orbit to protect high-value satellites, our satellites. Demons hover near an adversary satellite quietly waiting. So in an emergency, demons can be activated and hit the bad guy, disable it in one way or another. If a soft kill is warranted, the demon might just squirt slime onto a target's optics to temporarily blind a reconnaissance bird. Another wild one is a Hoover anti-satellite system. Now, this is a stealthy spacecraft that could vacuum up debris left in orbit by China's 2007 hit-to-kill test, for example, then park behind an active Chinese military satellite. And during a conflict, Hoover could silence its neighbor by firing orbital debris at the satellite. People's Liberation Army forensics experts would have to conclude that they had shot themselves down with their own space jump. In the cyber war realm, here are some of the futuristic weapons and information warfare scenarios my co-authors and I have dreamed up, employing modern American fighter aircraft fitted with Advanced Electronically Scanned Array, or ESA, radar systems to launch a covert attack against an adversary's oil refinery and shipping port. In our CounterSpace novel, ESA radar beams fired by stealthy F-22 Raptor and F-35 Lightning II fighters are combined to create mini EMPs to destroy microprocessors and electronic circuitry in a Venezuelan oil refinery's control system. Valves then randomly open and close, creating havoc and extensive damage throughout the oil handling and shipping complex. Bottom line is, Hugo Chavez couldn't ship a drop of oil for months, causing massive economic problems in Venezuela.
He's dead.
And he had no idea what hit him. Now, electromagnetic or electrostatic system that remotely disrupts the electrical activity of the human heart. Fired from a drone or a manned aircraft, these tailored signals trigger heart attacks and strokes, covertly killing a rogue nation's dictator or terrorist cartel's leaders, and smart dust to locate and neutralize terrorists. These are tiny, nanoscale systems that can be programmed to operate cooperatively, would be scattered from the air over a target community. Microscopic hunter bots could be programmed to search for the DNA of a particular suicide bomber. When they get a match, they'd clear their companion killer bots in, and they would be ingested by a terrorist's wife, children, or siblings. Now, these bioagents coating the killer bot nanoparticles would radically alter the target's behavior, ultimately causing considerable shame to be heaped on the suicide bomber's memory. Soon, nobody volunteers to strap on the suicide belt. The ultimate cyber attack might be a biostatic signal that affects a person's brain by altering his thoughts. Maybe a wannabe suicide bomber's thinking could be reprogrammed, inspiring him to leave his explosive vest in the attic and just keep driving the cab. Along the same line, what if biostatic signals could be tailored to a particular person's DNA, enabling the insertion of false images directly into the target's brain? So he thinks he sees an object with his eyes, but the object isn't really there. It only exists as an image in his brain created by these engineered signals beamed from a drone. The target can no longer tell the difference between what's real and what his brain falsely registers as if seen through his eyes. Now, what might be the effect of this brain spoofing, inserting false imagery? Could a political or military leader rapidly lose the confidence and trust of subordinates, rendering him ineffective? And then maybe he'd conclude that he is hallucinating and he's going crazy, so he's off the map. The bottom line is brain spoofing and cyber war weapons designed to interact with human biological systems would be invaluable for instilling fear, doubt, and division in an enemy force. Now, such wild-eyed concepts and scenarios may be confined to the realm of fiction, never to be realized in the real world. But perhaps the mere possibility could be developed in the field that is enough to neutralize threats. That's why authors and screenwriters really are a form of cyber warrior. Historically, as mentioned earlier, fiction/entertainment has been employed as one of mankind's most powerful vehicles for shaping perceptions. Stories are no-harm, no-foul vehicles, allowing one to suspend skepticism and barriers to belief. After all, we're just being entertained, right? Hollywood's been using stories as subliminal programming quite effectively for decades. For example, movies mentioned earlier in the 1950s and 60s, such as On the Beach and Dr. Strangelove, portrayed the horror of nuclear war in vivid, personal terms. So did those stark movies and literature of the time help shape policies and decisions that prevented nuclear war? It's hard to tell, but maybe they inspired us to collectively decide, let's not go there. A second example we can make a tighter connection to, the China Syndrome. It's a gripping movie about a nuclear reactor crisis. It was released in 1979. About 3 weeks later, the 3 Mile Island reactor accident occurred. So the combination of a fictional movie and a real-world accident virtually killed the nuclear power industry for more than 30 years in this country. So perhaps it's a stretch to classify fiction and entertainment as soft cyber war, but what if? What if fiction authors and Hollywood screenwriters were engaged to create entertainment featuring advanced, horrific weapons and tactics that instill fear and dissension among terrorist bands and deadly criminal cartels? Now, what if these stories rapidly spread throughout a culture through books, TV shows, the internet, and movies, capitalizing on the power of entertainment to shape perceptions? What if such a campaign were already underway? Maybe it is.